Alrighty, guys, we are starting our show now. How is everybody doing? Welcome in to Rover Sports, the show. This is going to be made into a podcast, so I hope that you guys are really enjoying. Well, I just started the show, so it would be hard for you to really have a definitive opinion one way or the other, whether the show was excellent or whether the show wasn't that great. But hopefully you guys will give this a listen. Maybe you're in the car, going for a long ride, going for an hour ride, and I just have to get the reps in. You know, as a guy that likes sports broadcasting, as a guy who has my own channel, I wanted to come down here, put on the headphones, and I wanted to rep, and I wanted to talk for an hour tonight on an array of topics. So that's what we are going to do for Rover Sports and for this podcast. So let me just turn up my headphones 1 second. All right, and now I think that the volume's increased. I think we can get in the zone a little bit. Let's get in the zone. Now is that better or what? So let's talk about the big news in the world of sports. And the big news in the world of sports is there's two sports right now that are trying to come back, and that is Major League Baseball and the National Basketball Association, the NBA. I'm going to first talk about a sport that I don't really commentate on a whole lot, and that is the sport of baseball. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and I really liked the Yankees and the Phillies. I despised the Boston Red Sox, and when those two teams played in the 2010 World Series, I had a tough time deciding which team I would root for, whether that be the Phillies or the New York Yankees. I remember the World Series also happened during Halloween. I think I might have been in 8th or 9th grade at the time. It was a good time of life. When you're in middle school, it really is a beautiful time in your life. You're young, you play sports with your friends, you don't have many worries. And I think I grew up in a very good era, being I'd say the mid to late 2000s, the music of Soulja Boy and the music of T.I. and 50 Cent and Lil Wayne all in their prime. It was just like a fun time to kind of grow up, and movies were absolutely hysterical, and sports and the Giants, during the Giants won in 7th grade and won in 11th grade. So back to baseball. Derek Jeter, my favorite player, almost in any sport, just the way he was the shortstop of the Yankees and his stature. And the rivalries in baseball growing up were better. The personalities in baseball were more interesting. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. Part of this podcast tonight is deciphering and figuring out why were the players that grew up during that time, why were they just so much more interesting? Not only to me, but the ratings also show. And what I believe the answer to that question is that now you have the infiltration of Netflix. The NBA season, you now have some summer league to watch. You have Netflix. You're busy with your life. Social media and Twitter is now huge, or Facebook. So you have social media that you could spend a lot of time on. Instagram, a lot of time in many places. Television options are, it's a more competitive sphere for baseball to compete in. I also think that I really miss baseball, kind of like hockey sort of went away from like the Danny Carcillo type of player that would just fight. I want baseball to have rugged guys. Like now everybody's talking about analytics, and analytics are fine, and Trevor Bauer, and that stuff's kind of interesting. But bunting being a part of baseball, the rivalries, the just sheer brute force of characters. There needs to be villains in baseball. There needs to be good guys in baseball. There needs to be heroes versus villains. So I even like the villains a lot in sports. I like Patrick Reed in golf. Bryson DeChambeau's a villain. I would say Jimmy Butler, maybe a little bit of a villain in the NBA. Trying to think of other guys that were villains, even guys that I hated that were villains, like I'd say Rasheed Wallace and the Pistons, even with Ben Wallace being an enforcer, like they were kind of villains. Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker was very annoying, as a guy who watched Jason Kidd and loved Jason Kidd. Villains are just so important to have in sports. And baseball has no real villains. I mean, maybe Machado is a villain, but I think everybody is so worried maybe about their public perception that they're not actually going out and they're not villains. And I like this guy from the Reds, Derek Diedrich, who's on the Trevor Bauer podcast. I like bat flippers, kind of cocky players. And that was when Bryce Harper went to the Phillies and he played the Nationals. That first series was very, very exciting. So baseball needs some juice and storylines. So I believe that the Astros, with the banging of the trash can, and Astros games are going to be very appealing. I'm just figuring out how could the sport of baseball become popular? How could the sport of baseball attract like casual fans like myself? Because watching 162 games of baseball, the players are often changing teams. I just think that baseball needs just sheer villains. It needs stories that can cross over lines. And I think that access to the players, that is really a problem with Major League Baseball. So we're going to take some time right now. I'm going to take about 7 minutes, and I'm going to try to tell you my ideas about how I would improve the game of baseball if I were the commissioner of baseball. And during this podcast, some of the topics you're going to like, some of them are going to be random, but I'm going to keep it to topics that I'm going to try to enjoy talking about. So there's something in the room that's bothering me. I'm going to get it, and we are going to continue this hour. It's an hour podcast, and maybe I'll release the hour podcast every single Friday when I have a lot of stuff to talk about. And then during the season, there might even be more opportunities for these long interview podcasts. And maybe you guys, I know that some people sitting in the car and things, you're going to like listening to a damn long podcast. If you have to drive, if before you go to sleep, you're going to enjoy listening to a podcast that's an hour long. The Joe Rogan, the Theo Vons of the world, you're going to enjoy it. So I'm just saying that maybe you'll freaking hate it. Maybe you'll effing hate the podcast. But there's this thing in my room that is bothering me at the moment. So I'm going to take care of it. And we are 7 minutes into the podcast. It should be about 15 seconds. And then I'll be right back in this chair. And we will be talking about Major League Baseball and what I would do to improve Major League Baseball. The problem has been resolved. It took about 20 seconds to actually resolve that problem. Man, minutes sometimes can go by so quickly. Baseball. You guys waited. You guys are good people. You waited. You made it skipped ahead. If you're listening on Apple, just press 15 twice, and you could skip ahead. The first solution to Major League Baseball is I love the idea of miking up the players. You see it in the world of golf, where I love Bryson DeChambeau. He's just killing the golf ball. I love the sport of golf. I play golf. It's fun. Everybody can pretty much play golf or go to a driving range. It is an expensive game, I will say that. But baseball, you start miking up these players so you get to see their personalities. Like have a Hard Knocks. Why not have a Hard Knocks? Baseball has so much money that every team, if they had a Hard Knocks, would be very, very interesting. Get to know the character of these guys. After they leave baseball, what are they doing? I want to know what pranks these guys do on the bus. I want to know, do these guys like other sports? Do these guys hang out and play golf? Do these guys chug beers on the road? Is this like a fraternity? Is it, who's the loud guy on the team? Who's the quiet guy on the team? I'd suggest you guys, after you watch this podcast, I'm going to give a shout out to another amazing channel, I think. And Brian Robeson of the Minnesota Vikings, he did 96 questions, and I would watch it with my dad. And the thing that Brian Robeson, he was a defensive lineman, and he made that Vikings team with Stephon Diggs and Everson Griffin and the characters. It was just an amazingly tight Vikings locker room, and you got to know the players well. And even as a Giants fan, not really interested in the Vikings, I got to see their culture. So there needs to be more social media. There needs to be more access, and that's what kind of Trevor Bauer has been giving me on his channel. Is you see the access. The MLB needs more access. It needs personality. So Mike Trout, he's a good guy. He'd be one of the good guys, but you need villains. You need a guy like a LeVar Ball that even if they're a little crazy, you need a pitcher to go at Mike Trout. Say you ain't shit, Mike Trout. Like, I'm gonna come at you. You're not getting a hit this game. There's got to be some real trash talk, some deep-seated, in the open trash talk that is promoted across social media and in the NFL. The MLB baseball, it needs the wide receiver cornerbacks. It needs some divas. It needs like Josh Norman versus Odell Beckham. You're going to need Trevor Bauer. You need smack talk in sports. And that's the thing now, is that you see guys in the NBA, they go up for a dunk, they stare down the opponent, and then suddenly that's called a technical foul. That's complete bullshit. You should be able to compete and show disrespect, not violent disrespect, but mental warfare with your opponent, and then be able to be buddies off of the floor. You should be able to say things in a game that the sport should be the safe place for real volatile words and conduct. And baseball needs to have some personalities. And the fact that you can't even upload highlights on Major League Baseball, the fact, I know it's a traditional game. You can have a team that's traditional, but then you should maybe have a team that wears like sleeveless jerseys. Like I saw the Reds wear sleeveless jerseys last year, or the Indians. So if baseball did that, you have a team that is a little crazy that wears the sleeveless jerseys versus a very buttoned up team. If baseball could start taking on and actually becoming more polarizing, where some people love this player, some hate him. Manny Ramirez was that guy. And for Boston fans, they absolutely loved Manny Ramirez. If not, you thought the guy's a jackass and you thought he's a jerk. Jabba Chamberlain is a guy that 95% of baseball absolutely hates Jabba Chamberlain, but I'm like the 5% that love the guy. So Kevin Youkilis, you need like those Red Sox-Yankees teams. Like I still remember Veritek and Johnny Damon and the 2003 Red Sox. I remember that team. I remember the Yankees. You know, Bernie Williams, Derek Jeter, and Mussina and Posada, and they enter Sandman for Mo Rivera. These players need to be marketed. There needs to be bat flips. There needs to be, if there's a fight where they're throwing the ball at each other, there's a fight. There needs to be better post-game interviews. The media needs to be a lot better. The sport has room to grow. It's 162 games. There is downsides to it. It does take long. And if there's a pitcher, by the way, my big pet peeve in baseball is during the regular season, if there's a starting pitcher. Now, I know relievers can sometimes be quirky and take their time, but there's a starting pitcher in baseball that just happens to like eye up the catcher for the sign, and they take like 20 seconds between each pitch to decide what they're going to throw. And then, you might see a baseball player like foul off like 10 balls. You might see him foul off, and suddenly then the at-bat it can last like 10 minutes. And sometimes it's a compelling at-bat, but other times the pitcher is just taking forever. And that's the thing. Usually baseball announcers are dry. There's no Gus Johnsons in baseball announcing. There's no you got to have a really fun baseball announcer. You got to have a fun baseball team, a team that's going to joke around, a team that your enemies are really going to hate. Dave Gettleman is a great topic to talk about with you guys because there's real hatred out there for Dave Gettleman. That's why things that are polarizing are very popular. in the world in general, in anything. You could talk about a show or a podcast. Do you like that podcast? No, I don't. Do you like this person? Do you like this person in power in business? Like you look at Barstool and Dave Portnoy, and people hate him. A lot of people really like him. You know, he gets in fights with Goodell. He gets in fights all the time. It's fun. And that's what draws. That's what at least draws me is conflict. And baseball just really doesn't have conflict. So the way to create conflict is to encourage these players to be more competitive. I think that major league owners should also pay players more money for less games of baseball. I think that there should be 110 games of baseball. Starting in April is too soon. You start the season in May. You play 110 games of baseball. You know, still a lot of games, but you also give time for rest. So you're not playing like 3 consecutive games. Like there might be you have more time off. So also the catchers, you know, can get more days off, and just players get more time off. The outfielders in baseball as well. The pitcher hitting is pretty decent. But DHs might be more fun because then they can hit home runs. So I don't know where I stand on that. That's a very interesting kind of question, whether I like the pitcher hitting or whether I do not. I think it should be universal across the board. I don't like I think Major League Baseball needs to incorporate the AL. There needs to be more cross-sectional rivalries. If you actually made baseball and you made the Yankees, Phillies, Red Sox all in the same division, and the Mets, if you put them all in a powerhouse division, then I think baseball would be tremendous. You know, then you could leave, you know, Florida, Atlanta. What are the teams in the AL you have the Florida Marlins. You do have the Atlanta Braves. Let's think about, you know, teams that are in the South. You know, you maybe have your South quadrant of baseball. So I'm trying to think about the teams that are located down south. I mean, the Texas Rangers, you know, have the Rangers. Maybe they can go east and play the Atlanta Braves. So geographically speaking, then I know you do have the Pittsburgh Pirates. So you could have, you know, the Cubs and Cardinals is very, very good. Maybe make the White Sox and the Cubs part of one division. So I don't know why my screen just got all blurry. That's a lot better. There, I fixed it. Maybe spitting into the microphone. But these are a lot of suggestions. I think that basically having the Yankees and Phillies part of one division, it's going to be amazingly fun. You get Sierra and Judge come to the ballpark. You know, the Marlins are honestly a very boring team. They're not very good. The Mets have never really been that good either. The rivalries need to start heating up in baseball. And I think if the Mets and Yankees were in the same division, it would be absolutely incredible. So then maybe you make baseball. You could even go away from even NL and AL, and you could even have like an entire tournament. But if the Yankees and Mets played each other a lot, if teams from the Northeast played each other, then you have the teams like Toronto and Baltimore. Those are not historic franchises. You can easily put Baltimore with like a Pittsburgh Pirates. You put Baltimore with like the Pirates, you put that sphere all in there, you put the Reds and the Indians all together, you start doing a geographic rivals, you know, and then out west, they can all be geographic rivals. It'll make the sport really good. Maybe you have like an East versus West, you know, thing with baseball. And I think that that's actually a really interesting solution, and it'll also help market the game. And I know if the Yankees are playing, I know if the Red Sox are playing the Phillies, it would create so much buzz and excitement for Major League Baseball if you had just a powerhouse division. It would make it amazing. And then for the Midwest and the teams that get overlooked, they're going to have to prove their worth as well with exciting entertainment for baseball. The minor league system is kind of broken. Maybe you can have like the minor league teams somehow just like start their own baseball league where the players are all not that good, and you make baseball players, you make them maybe wait till they're 23 to be eligible for the MLB draft, because you draft them at like 24 years old. They have to go to college for 4 years. So then when they're 22 years old, they're immediately getting put on the big MLB rosters. Then maybe you have like, I don't know if you want to have one single AAA team, but I would even just have one big club of Major League Baseball, and I would just have one. I would have one club for Major League Baseball. The minor leagues destroy Major League Baseball. You can't keep track of these young players. The reason why the college football is great and even high school is because, like, you can watch a kid like Jake Fromm. You could watch Jake Fromm in a high school quarterback show, QB1. I watched Jake Fromm, I watched Spencer Rattler, and then you can follow the guys like Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence, especially Tua. You follow Tua from the Elite 11. Who else is in the Elite 11 that's now in the NFL balling? Like Matt Stafford. Let's think of the guys that are young guys that got drafted. Baker Mayfield wasn't in the Elite 11. Sam Darnold, I'm not sure if Darnold was in it. Josh Allen wasn't. I don't think Lamar Jackson was in it either. Let's see, was Mahomes? Mahomes might have actually been in the Elite 11. I know Davis Webb was an Elite 11 guy. Shea Patterson was an Elite 11 guy. There's big-time quarterbacks that get drafted. Deshaun Watson was absolutely an Elite 11 guy who goes to Clemson. So Jameis Winston, a big-time Elite 11 guy with Trent Dilfer, and it was just exceptional watching these quarterbacks. And then you got to follow their careers. They then go to college football, and then you see wherever they're going to get drafted. And Trey Lance is going to be fun to watch because the NFL draft is huge. The Major League Baseball draft, it's awful. It's unwatchable. The Major League Baseball network isn't that entertaining. The personalities are just not. And that's the problem. It needs to spice up. Major League Baseball needs to spice up. I also proposed changing the divisions. I proposed more bat flips and more social media presence. And there's a lot, and trash talk and real conflict between teams and real controversy. And this will really attract the game of baseball. It is a sleeping giant. It's a fun game to watch. Major League Baseball playoffs are absolutely exceptional. You get rid of the one-game wild card solution, and you have some real competitive series, real deep-seated rivalries, maybe even have the teams play like a series and a series against each other, have them play like 8 games to the point where they are hating each other. And that's the key. You got to get some real pride in your team, not just about making huge money. You got to have real pride in the teams of Major League Baseball, and that's what's going to draw me back to Major League Baseball. The 60-game season is also going to be very exciting, just the way it is. And I'm not saying that they should go to 60 games. Baseball should be a longer sport, but it should be 110 games. Make the games matter more. But I think baseball now, when it gets started with the first for sports, I think baseball is going to be absolutely huge. Now you look at the NBA, and the NBA is doing something very exciting. They're going to have games on during the day. You're gonna have NBA games on starting at like 1 o'clock, starting at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I'm just listing all the titles for the NBA games. So these games are going to be tipping off in the middle of your workday, and now you're going to get to completely miss the game, but you're going to be on your phone now at work. And that's going to be even more exciting. I mean, there's literally during the day, there's been nothing exciting. I mean, maybe a PGA Tour leaderboard of Bryson DeChambeau. Maybe if you're betting on harness racing or if you're betting on horse racing, maybe that can be really exciting. But the NBA having basketball back. Now, the NBA is a sport where, unfortunately, the stars dominate the sport. It sucks the way it is because you can be a Magic fan and you have no chance of winning. You could be a Utah Jazz fan or a Trailblazers fan, and the Trailblazers are like the version of the Baltimore Ravens. They're always, pretty close to winning. They always win a playoff series. They're a very good basketball team, but they have no chance of winning the ultimate goal. Dame Lillard has no chance of beating LeBron James. He's not as good as LeBron James. He can't do the things LeBron does. LeBron can't be guarded. So the NBA has a big, big parity problem. The NBA is a very good product. I would say that would I say actually the NBA is a good product? I would say the regular season at times is not that good. Playoff basketball, when you're allowed to hit each other and play defense like the Raptors style. Physical basketball is a good brand of basketball. Physical basketball. That's why I love college basketball. The sport of basketball is great. The personalities of the NBA are also just very out there. They do an unbelievable job of marketing the players, marketing new players. So the NBA has all of that down. Now, with this bubble situation, I think the NBA freaks out a little bit more than maybe the sport of golf with the bubble and the coronavirus. And the thing that we don't really have context of going back to this coronavirus is you look at the death numbers and the death numbers go down, but you don't really know. You're not really you're not really privy to details on who has the virus and how awful it could be. Is it a fever? Is the 14 days absolutely hell? And you hear the worst stories and then you hear the best. Like, it was nothing. I didn't feel a thing. Or you hear, it was absolutely brutal. I had 103 fever. I almost had to go to the hospital. So for these young kids that are getting the virus, like, how bad really is it? And I think, and it's very hard to get really, really accurate information about this coronavirus specifically, because the people that want everything to go back, which I want everything to go back, they say, the death numbers are down. But then you don't really hear about like guys who have it. We want to hear details about when you have this virus, how awful is it? For the majority of young kids, is it just like a little cold? Are you able to get through it? Could you play a football game with it? These are the questions that should be answered. How bad is getting the coronavirus? Because it's out there. There's fear media out there, and then there's media that doesn't think it's a big deal. Everything is very polarized, politicized on media so that it gets more clicks, so that you go to your base, you get more clicks. That's kind of what media is. It's what sports media is. It all needs to be interesting. It can't just be, in some cases it's okay, and some it's not okay. You need to take polarizing stances in order for your show to really be viewed a lot. That's media. That's media. So, but about the coronavirus, how bad is it if these guys are going to get if they're going to get the virus? If a 45-year-old gets the virus, and then here's the other thing. Is that there's not going to be a vaccine for probably 2 years. People say it's going to be a year. That would be insane. Usually the vaccine takes 5 years. So then, unrealistic. I think it's unrealistic to not play sports for 4 years. I would hate that. So eventually, you take the risk. And if some people don't want to play, no one's forcing players to play. So it's just good having it. I'm a sports fan and I love sports. That's the angle that I take. If I was a player, I'd watch out for my family, but I'd want to play, especially when you're in the prime of your career, prime of your profession, of your craft. It's just awesome to play. So, NBA in the bubble, who's going to win the NBA? The NBA, with all of these precautions going on, the fact that Disney World is open, you just want to see the thing be as good as possible, and for the NBA, they just want to finish the thing because you're going to have guys that end up getting the virus and take time off, and it's going to be a crazy environment down there in Orlando. with the virus, with all the distractions. So it's very hard to project, who's going to have the virus. I guess we could talk Celtics and Sixers. The Celtics have a very good basketball team. So let's just take the virus talk out of the NBA. Okay, let's just take it and let's just have an NBA basketball sports discussion on this show. I look at the Bucks, and I'm not a Bucks believer. I don't think that the Greek Freak is capable of bringing his team past the Boston Celtics in the East. The Boston Celtics, Brad Stevens is a better coach than Mike Budenholzer. Chris Middleton is a choker. He's not good in the playoffs. He is not a clutch playoff performer. He is a decent shooter of the ball. The Celtics have Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, who's a superstar player, who's by far the second best player in the series. You then have Jaylen Brown, who is an unbelievable player as well, great defender. Gordon Hayward's coming back, Marcus Smart. So the Celtics are a deeper team than Milwaukee. They're a better basketball team. I look at the Raptors, and I have I know a couple of players on the Raptors: Fred VanVleet, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, all really good guys. And they're a team that's very likable. They have no Kawhi Leonard this year. I don't know if they have the firepower to compete with the Celtics. And then the Bucks from 3, they are still a very good team. I mean, the Bucks were still a couple of games away from winning the East last year. They were up 2-0. They blew Game 3 in Toronto. The refs were bad in that game. And then Toronto, Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry, it was just an amazing, amazing performance by Toronto to get past the Bucks and to end up winning that championship. So the Celtics, I really think that they're a dark horse, really interesting team. You look at Embiid. If Embiid is at peak of powers, this is going to be Embiid's best year in the NBA this year. So Embiid, this is the best he's going to be. I think the Sixers need to trade Embiid after the season. I know Embiid's a super likable guy, and you have to get emotion out of it if you are a GM. You have to get the emotion out of it. Embiid's been hurt. His eating habits aren't that great. Down low, he's not dominant. Centers aren't the same way utilized during this model of basketball. Maybe in 4 years, we'll go back and see your Jahlil Okafor's dominating or your big guys dominating. You look really at Embiid, and I think the Sixers should trade him to Miami because he's tight with Jimmy Butler. The Sixers need a Tyler Hero as a shooting guard with Ben Simmons. You surround the team with Simmons, his amazing skill set of passing the basketball, of defending, of dribbling as a taller point guard, and you surround them with shooters. And really, the Tobias Harris contract is too much money, but Toby's perfect for the style of play. You also have Al Horford in the middle, but Al Horford, that was a horrible contract for Melton Brand. The whole summer was a real strikeout with Tobias Harris not looking good. The Horford deal absolutely atrocious for a guy his age, and that slow. So the Sixers, and then trading Landry Shamet. That trade of Landry Shamet just crushed the Sixers. Not having Dario Saric who could help out the 76ers. So this Sixers team is just not as good. Bellinelli losing out on him. You get a Richardson with the Jimmy Butler trade, but I'm not even thrilled about Josh Richardson. He'll have a game or two, but he's a very, very, very inconsistent player. So that is kind of where I stand with the 76ers, with Brett Brown. It's crazy around Brett Brown, and he's probably not going to get fired because of the virus, because of everything that is transpiring. So the Sixers, I don't see the Sixers getting out of the East whatsoever. I don't see them going on some run. Could Embiid be ridiculous? He's going to have to be. Now let's shift to the Western Conference. You have two teams that can win this conference. You have you have two teams from LA that can win. You have the Clippers and the Lakers. It's going to be Clippers-Lakers. It's going to be a phenomenal series. LeBron James at peak of powers with Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. I think that the edge might go to the Los Angeles Lakers. I would like to see the Clippers win. I like Beverly. I like Kawhi Leonard. Leonard's my favorite player in the league. Could Leonard beat LeBron James and the Lakers? Whoever wins Lakers versus Clippers is going to end up winning the NBA Finals. Could the Clippers finally do it in Orlando? I think it makes sense. I'd give the edge to the Clippers. It'll go 7 games, but Paul George is going to have to play well. The betting line, the Lakers are the favorites because of Anthony Davis, because of Caldwell Pope, because of the shooters that the Lakers are going to have on the perimeter. But the LA Clippers are also a deep team. They're very tough in the bubble. I don't think that I think they're going to let the guys play. There's not going to be a lot of foul calls. You also have no crowd to influence the game, which is a big advantage for the Clippers because the Lakers would sell out every single game if it was a conference finals game in Staples. Even for the whole series would be in Staples, it would be exceptional. In this format, the Clippers are going to have the upper hand in this bubble. The foul calling won't be as serious. Beverly is going to push around everybody. The Clippers with Montrezl Harrell, they're tough. That's what they are. They're a tough team, and they're going to out-tough the Lakers. I think the Clippers even won 3-1 in this series during the season. So I like Clippers and I like Celtics, and then in the end, I think the Clippers can probably beat the Celtics in a great finals. That would be my prediction, is Clippers versus Boston, which a lot of people think is crazy. A lot of people think it's going to be Bucks, Clippers, or Bucks, Lakers, one of those 3. But, I think that it could be the Celtics. And then the Greek Freak, he's going to have to be quarantined on a whole. Just the level of quarantining that the Greek Freak is going to have to endure is going to absolutely be absurd. All right, 37 minutes in or 35 minutes in, I'm going to talk a little bit of NFL, and then I'm going to go to college for the last maybe 15 minutes of this show. Once again, guys, thank you for listening here. It's a straight hour. When you do an hour podcast and you have minimal sips of water, you are able to kind of develop your radio voice. You're able to develop your voice and your podcasting style. When you talk for an hour, you have to be able to develop thoughts, and it's very difficult. And then when you're asked to do, let's just say a 5-minute video, a 10-minute video, you are then more equipped to be able to handle that when you do an hour of talking. When you talk into a microphone, you're able then, especially when you do it by yourself, you're on an island, you then can try to become immune to difficulties of finding words to say. So this is an hour. It's not easy. I'm not a very outgoing guy. I'm selectively outgoing as an individual. So some guys are incredibly blessed with the ability to be incredible, to be outgoing, and they can carry on shows for 3 or 4 hours. And those are some of the best guys in the game. So know your skill set, know what you can do. So for me, an hour is pretty dang tough. Some are sprinters, some can do both. The great ones can do both. They could do an awesome 8-minute video, and then they could kick ass for a 4-hour stream. So those guys are just unbelievable. I would need energy drinks. I would need so much caffeine that by the end of this podcast, I would just be in a horrible mood because I would have so much caffeine that the rest of the night I'd be wired, I'd be awake, I'd be bothering people. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the NFL and what teams really scare me as a Giants fan out of the NFC East. So the New York Giants, the NFC East. Doug Peterson is an overrated football coach. He's not going to ever win a Super Bowl ever again. You can mark it down right here. The date today is the 26th of June, and it is 9 o'clock. Doug Peterson is not winning another Super Bowl. Carson Wentz is not winning a Super Bowl. Doug Peterson's never going to play in an NFC championship again. Now, maybe Carson will play in an NFC championship game for the Eagles, but Doug Peterson isn't that good of a coach. He had one phenomenal year. He's like the Brian Billick or Jim Caldwell of coaches. He had a magical season. His plan worked for a little bit. But Andy Reid is 3 times the coach of Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson is good at going for it. He's good at playing aggressively. But in terms of his innovation as a play caller, it's just not to that level. He runs the same kind of RPO games. He's very, very stubborn. The hires of the Eagles, it's Al Groh, who he can micromanage. He has nobody challenging him to be better. And if the Vikings just simply beat the Chicago Bears, there wouldn't have been that whole Nick Foles second revival. There wouldn't have been that Chicago Bears playoff game. And Matt Nagy coached a shitty football game, and Matt Nagy was an awful, awful coach last year. I mean, benching Mitch Trubisky against the Rams was bizarre. Trubisky's your guy. You drafted Trubisky number 2. So Matt Nagy letting the Eagles into the playoffs was a huge mistake. And then I will give Doug credit. I mean, they played Chicago fantastically. And then against the Saints, I mean, the first quarter, the Eagles played an unbelievable first quarter. And then the Saints, Drew Brees played an amazing game. And the Eagles still had an opportunity to beat the Saints. So Doug Peterson's greatest asset is his competitiveness, but as an innovative play caller, he's nowhere close to Sean McVay. He's nowhere close to Kyle Shanahan. If you look at the NFC coaches, it's Joe Judge, who's up here on a level by himself. The Giants are going to have a dynasty. And then you look at the other coaches. McCarthy is a better coach than Doug Peterson. Shanahan is a better football coach than Doug. You could say Carroll, but Carroll is mostly living in the past. He doesn't have the defense anymore. They paid Russell Wilson just too much money. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if the Seahawks had Jarrett Stidham as their quarterback, making $300,000 a year, and they were able to have a competent football team, they would have a better chance than with a superstar quarterback. That's just the way it's going to go. Even when the Chiefs are going to pay Mahomes, it's going to be very hard for Mahomes to get back to a championship. Seattle made it to the second round of the playoffs last year, but they might as well have been playing in Siberia. They had no chance to beat Green Bay. And they had no chance to. Their roster is just terrible, front, top to bottom. They have a crap roster right now. Their defense has no premier players. Clowney was their one premier player. Even against the Eagles, they didn't just wipe out that Eagles team. So you have DK Metcalf. You don't have a running game. Your offensive line has been putrid for a long time. Running the ball, they have no premier running backs. Their defense is just not good. They have no secondary. Their defensive line is not where it needs to be. Are the Seahawks going 12-4 this year? Probably not. Everybody gives Russell Wilson credit. He deserves it. He is the one guy that carries that team. He's a miracle worker. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks that we have seen in modern-day NFL. But do you want to have one of the great superstars? Do you want to keep selling money and selling tickets and having the best spokesperson in the NFL, which is Russell Wilson? On and off the field, the guy is absolute gold. He's class. He's everything you would want in a quarterback. He's fantastic. I can't say enough great things about Russell Wilson. But the thing about Russell Wilson is that he's not winning a championship anytime soon. And Mahomes, he has about 2 more years until he gets paid $42 million a year. That's the way the NFL goes. So looked at Carroll, looked at Shanahan. Shanahan's a better head coach than, than Doug Peterson. McCarthy's a better football coach than Doug Peterson. Let's look at the rest of the coaches in the NFC. I'd probably I'm not sold on LaFleur whatsoever, but now LaFleur is Jordan Love. It's going to be more interesting now with LaFleur and the roster rebuild. I think LaFleur's okay, but I'm not that sold. Mike Zimmer or Doug Peterson, I would still take Doug. Now, Mike Zimmer also has a great offensive coordinator in Gary Kubiak. Their draft strategy has been absolutely spectacular. So the job that Spielman is doing in Minnesota is absolutely spectacular. So Minnesota's going to be a team with Kirk Cousins, with Justin Jefferson, with their team. They're going to be a team that is going to probably go to the Super Bowl or go to the NFC Championship again. They're going to easily win. They're going to be 12-4, and they're going to win. They'll probably win the NFC regular season, so they'll be hosting. Every game will go through Minnesota for the playoffs. And then it's going to be 49ers-Vikings in that dome. It's going to be absolutely riveting to see if the 49ers can go on the road and do it. I think the 49ers defense will actually win that game. I think the 49ers will be champions this year. It could be Chiefs Saints. I did say Bills 49ers. In actuality, I'm not sure if I want to say that again. The AFC is so weak. I think even the Patriots might have a better chance than Buffalo. I just don't see Josh Allen the Bills can win the division, but I don't see Josh and McDermott getting to a Super Bowl. Now, I could be wrong, and I like the Bills. Drew Lock is too young to get to a Super Bowl. Could Josh Allen had the playoff experience. Could he get to a Super Bowl? I still think that New England has just as good of a chance as Buffalo to get to the Super Bowl with Jarrett Stidham. It could be Jarrett Stidham versus Garoppolo in the Super Bowl. It could be Patriots-Niners in the Super Bowl. I think the Niners are going to win the Super Bowl, though. They're going to go on the road. They're going to be road warriors. They're going to go to Minnesota. They're going to win an epic game, and then they're going to go to the Super Bowl. So, we're still going around the league. Do I think Cliff is a better coach than Doug? I don't think so, but Cliff is not awful. Then you continue to look around the NFL landscape, right, at the coaches. I take McCarthy. Did we go over the NFC South? I'll take Sean Payton over Doug. Will I take Arians over Peterson? Yes, I will, especially for the next – however long Arians is coaching, Arians is a better coach than Peterson. I know Peterson won the championship, but Arians has been coaching longer. He coached in Arizona. He made the playoffs with Andrew Luck. He's a rock star coach. He has Todd Bowles. He knows how to run a defense as a head coach. So I'm taking Arians as well. I would take Matt Rule over Doug Peterson. I just trust Matt Rule a lot more than Doug. And then you look at either Dan Quinn or Doug. Doug beat Dan Quinn. So Doug is not terrible, but he's an overrated coach. In the league, he's about 15th, and he's just or maybe 13th in the league as a head coach. I like how aggressive Doug is, but he has no roster control. He doesn't know. He drafted Jalen Hurts, which was an awful selection. And don't give me the, Howie Roseman makes the decisions, okay? Doug Peterson is behind every decision. When you're the head coach, you better be involved in the decisions, or you're a crap head coach. You're crappy at your job. Your job as a coach is to pick your players, is to be involved in that process with the GM. Everything is together. If you have crappy players and your team ends up losing, you get fired. You get fired after all of that. So Doug Peterson, he hasn't improved the defense. The defensive line is not very good. Jim Schwartz runs the same scheme. Carson Wentz has regressed under Doug Peterson. There's no running game whatsoever. The offensive line is still good, but just with Doug, can Doug create explosive plays? Can he do it? He drafts Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, thinks Rager's going to be better. That's what Doug tells us. They have Jalen Hurts there. The Eagles are just on the decline. Dallas Cowboys on the upswing, especially for the near future. You have CeeDee Lamb, who's going to be an immediate impact player. Could Diggs from Alabama be good? What's his name? Trayvon Diggs, the brother of Stephon Diggs. Yes. Could they possibly have a decent defense? Maybe. If Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith come on and play well, maybe. They're just got to have a good enough defense. I think with McCarthy and Kellen Moore and all the analytics, I think McCarthy could come out on fire. I think this is the revival that Mike McCarthy needs. I think that the coach, the hire by the Cowboys, is actually very good. And this is a team in Dallas that is going to win the division, and they're going to be there with the Vikings and the Niners this year. So I think the Cowboys are trending very upwards. For just speaking in this season's terms with Zeke and everything going on, I think the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott as a franchise tag, the Cowboys are going to be a team that is going to be good. I'm not saying they're going to win anything, but they're going to be deep into the playoffs with Mike McCarthy. So it's going to be a good season. They're going to run away with the division. I think the Cowboys, the Vikings are easy selections. Then you talk about in the NFC West. I then think that the 49ers are going to win that division, but only at 11-5. The Rams will be there. The Seahawks will be at 9 wins, and Arizona's not going to be all that good this year. Arizona is not going to be good. They're all off-season hype train, but Cliff Kingsbury's never had a defense before. You have Kyler Murray. You're then banking on a running back in Kenyon Drake that only had about maybe 5 good games in his NFL career. So Kenyon Drake is not the most consistent running back out there in the world. So it'll be the 49ers, the Dallas Cowboys. Then in the NFC South, you do have the Saints. They're going to be great. Tampa Bay will be fine. We'll get into the playoffs. We'll be a good football team as well. So, but as a Giants fan, who do I really fear? I would say the Cowboys more so. Going forward, I think the Eagles will take a nosedive, and that's the thing is for the Giants. You just didn't trust Pat Shurmur. When you're going to battle with Pat Shurmur, you're going into a gunfight with a knife because Shurmur is weak. He's weak. He doesn't command a room, and he doesn't command opponent. He doesn't strike intimidation in opponents, and Joe Judge is going to do everything like that. He's going to strike a lot of fear in the Eagles and in the Cowboys. As a Giants fan, you're going to feel guilty about winning in about 3 years. It's going to be a wonderful time to be a Giants fan, but Giants fans have been through tumultuous times, even during the Super Bowl. Even during the 2 Super Bowls, in between those years were not even good. The years they won the Super Bowl, they were the 4 seed, and then they were the last team in. Maybe were they the 6 seed, or they played Tampa Bay. On the other side of the bracket, you had Seattle playing against Green Bay. So I think it might have been the Marshawn Lynch year, where Marshawn went crazy, beat the Saints, and then you had that unbelievable. You had Brett Favre with the scoop throw and in the snow in Lambeau, Seattle. Then did you have the Patriots beating like the Jaguars that year? Maybe you did. You had a night game. The Patriots balled out and beat the Jaguars. Or who did the Patriots end up defeating? I know they beat the Ravens. No, they beat the Chargers. Beat the Chargers that year. So for the Chargers to get to that championship, who the heck did the Chargers defeat in the actual playoffs to get to the AFC Championship? Who did the Chargers defeat to get to an actual AFC Championship? I was in Dallas, Texas, when the Giants ended up beating the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. It was one of the greatest days of my life on earth, was when R.W. McQuarters, I was kneeling down in the bleachers, had one knee on the ground, almost kneeling down with 2 knees, begging for that to be an interception or incomplete. Romo took the snap. He fired end zone. R.W. McQuarters right there. Your heart sank as Romo threw that ball into the end zone. Amazing play by R.W. The Toomer catch set the tone for the game. The Cowboys, it was kind of like that Saints-Eagles game because the Cowboys, even in the third quarter, I think they took a lead. The second quarter, after the Toomer catch, from about 13 minutes to about 1 minute when Eli had the 2-minute drill, the Cowboys were the better team, controlling the game, running the football. Terrell Owens, catches, Patrick Creighton, Witten, everything. But they weren't resulting in points, so it was real bend-not-break style Perry-fueled defense. And then what ended up happening was the 2-minute drill, the catch the Toomer, the Brandon Jacobs drive. The Giants kind of figured shit out in the third quarter, though. That drive at the end of the third quarter with Jacobs, they really figured that out. So yeah, I was talking about the Chargers. I was, being a Giants fan, that's what we were talking about earlier. Being a Giants fan is really, really difficult because you had 2 Super Bowl years, but they were out of nowhere. They were miracle years. And yes, those Super Bowls carry you about 4 or 5 years. So the 2011 or 12 Super Bowl, that carried me up until about 2017. And that's when, after 6 years of really losing and sucking, that's when you're like, come on, figure this shit out. And then this year, the firing of Shurmur helped get me real back into Giants pride and everything. the trading of Beckham. So all of that really helped. But the lowest period for the Giants was after the McAdoo years. 3-13 was brutal. And then the 2 years of Shermer were really bad, and the end of Coughlin was really bad. So the Giants throughout the last decade have not been better than the Eagles or Cowboys. I mean, yes, they have the Super Bowl, so maybe it's been better than the Cowboys, but it hasn't been good products at all. It's been 6-10, 7-9, 8-8 football. And Eli Manning, he helped those teams win the championships. He's clutch. Those 2 championships, they bought you time, or else the Giants would be a joke. But the 2 championships buy you life and buy you Hall of Fame stature. And that's what Eli Manning is. He's a Hall of Famer. Eli Manning, Hall of Famer. He's a talented quarterback, but one of the worst decision makers maybe to ever make it into a Hall of Fame. One of maybe the least athletic players ever in NFL history in terms of how he runs around the quarterback position. He is and his arm strength just above average. Other than that, I mean, Eli Manning, is a good quarterback, but for the Hall of Fame, I mean, mentally was he elite? That's why Eli Manning made it in, because it's all mental fortitude. It's all being the underdog. It's being this guy from Mississippi that has to win over New York. It's all the off-the-field stuff. It's all of the how he carried himself as a teammate, how he was loved as a teammate, how he represented himself as the New York Giants quarterback. I mean, if you're the quarterback of the New York Giants, that's one of the top 5 positions in all sports. You look at shortstop for the Yankees, the Cowboys quarterback. Maybe the Lakers star player like a LeBron James, Lakers, Yankees, Giants. So, you look at sports, and that's why Eli Manning is getting in. He's one of the least talented players to ever make it into the Hall of Fame. But other than those years, it's been tough. But with Joe Judge, I think Judge can be a better coach than Tom Coughlin. That's saying a lot, because Coughlin taught us all life lessons at an early age. Show up 5 minutes early. He taught us discipline. And that's the thing about Coughlin. That's kind of the era of Coughlin. I definitely think he coached players harder. Players would absolutely hate him, and they did in Jacksonville. They hated that style. But the Giants, they had super mature guys. I'm not saying Jacksonville didn't. But the Giants guys, I mean, Coughlin loosened up a little bit. He was also maybe Tom Coughlin. Maybe since he doesn't have to coach these guys every day, he has less of a relationship. So he does spend less time than when he was coaching. So Tom Coughlin, perfect mix for the Giants, and he was a disciplinarian, and I do respect Tom Coughlin, and I do love Tom Coughlin because he really cared about the players, he cared about winning, he cared about their lives. You talk to guys on the teams that Coughlin had for the Giants, and he's revered for New York Giants football. The Jacksonville Jaguars, now maybe the guys Coughlin was drafting, maybe they don't buy into the old school mentality. He was drafting Ramsey and Fournette and these guys in Yindakwe that are not buying into his philosophy of old school mentality. But there's still old school mentality that still works. The Patriots have old school mentality, and it still works, with Bill Belichick. The San Antonio Spurs have old school, kind of less individualistic, more teamwork mentality, and it still works. But Joe Judge, Coughlin was inconsistent. At the end of his tenure, wasn't that good. Bill Parcells is the greatest coach in Giants history. They had unbelievable consistency, and the 86 Giants are the greatest team the Giants have ever had. Wire-to-wire champions, LT in his prime, greatest team in franchise history is 86. The 86 Giants are perfect. The other two Super Bowls, though, or the other three, are just a sweep because, you have the Norwood miss, you have the game against San Francisco, legendary game. In the NFC Championship, you had the 2011 NFC Championship, legendary game. I think the 2007 NFC Championship is maybe the greatest game in Giants history other than the Patriots game. I'd probably go the Patriots game, 18-0, the Tyree catch 1. And I would go to Giants-Packers in 2007. I put that as the second greatest game I've ever watched. And then you look at what other games are epic. I'm listing the top 10 now of Giants games because we're talking about the Giants now on the podcast. So that's kind of the direction that we're going in. So, number 3. We'll do, is it Giants beating the Patriots again? Super Bowl was good. Mario Manningham catch, unbelievable drive to win the Super Bowl. I think that has to be number 3. And these are all games that I've watched. Cowboys playoff game, definitely in the top 4. It can even be 3 to some people, beating the Cowboys that way with Jessica Simpson. That's definitely the clear-cut top 4 of games that I've watched as a 25-year-old guy that's a Giants fan. Those 4 are clearly top 4. Now you're going to think about the other games. I would go regular season beating the Cowboys in 11 with Victor Cruz. I would put that game in the top 5. I think that's even better than the Falcons because sacking Romo, dominating the Cowboys, Sunday Night Football, winning you're in, last game of the regular season. That's phenomenal stuff. Then could you go beating Aaron Rodgers? Absolutely. Beating a 15-1 Green Bay team and slaughtering them in Lambeau Field, that's got to be in the top 6 as well. That's got to be right there. Then you look at, I covered 7 pretty good. Would you put the Bills game? How about the Jets play? The Cruz play against the Jets is great. The Falcons game was a really awesome game, but I'm not putting that. Could that be in the top 10? Maybe. I'm putting in the top 10 of games. I went to the link. Giants were down big against the Eagles, down by double digits, and the Giants end up winning in overtime. Plexico Burress touchdown over the shoulder from Eli Manning. Great throw, great catch. I'll put Eli Manning also hitting, I think, Toomer against the Denver Broncos. That was a classic game. A regular season stuff, but still unbelievable. The game where Jason Pierre-Paul, Giants down 12, Eli brings them back. 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Pierre-Paul blocks the field goal after Coughlin ices the kicker. Unbelievable game. The Strahan game where he sacked McNabb 10 times. That game in the top 10 as well. So I listed pretty much those are the games that really come to mind. And I'm sure there's now just thinking about all the memories. You know, this game with Daniel Jones, if Jones goes on to do something, I mean, first career start of Jones, epic. Matt Gay missing that field goal, Jones leading him into the end zone. What a high, incredible high after feeling that game, in all honesty. What else was a real big high? A lot of times the Cowboys would beat the Giants when the Giants would wear the red jerseys, and I liked the red jerseys, the alternates. Even though the Giants never won, they were a really cool little twist. Just enough cool of a twist, not overdoing it. I don't even like the color rush. I'm not a fan of color rush for the New York Giants. I'm not. The white color rush, not at all. But the red jerseys were cool. Again, you're a kid. You're nostalgic about that time in your life. What else kind of happened? What other games that you can go back and think of? I mean, even the losses when Peyton would play Eli, when Big Ben played the Giants, even or even Eli versus Aaron Rodgers was a classic game. Eli versus Drew Brees, I didn't really like that game. That was a 1:00 game. Eli against the Eagles getting banged up, getting killed his first when he came into the game for the first time, like watching a newborn baby come out and try to walk for his first time. And that's Eli Manning, just a guy that I watched from cover to cover, a guy that really started off as a guy who could barely walk in the league and could barely function at the quarterback position. And then suddenly in 4 years as a 5-year-old, he's like an 8-year-old in terms of his progression. He goes with the biggest, baddest bully and in terms of Tom Brady and the coach and Bill Belichick, and he stands toe-to-toe with them, and during the defining moment, he makes the greatest play in NFL history. That story arc is why he's in the Hall of Fame. It's about telling stories. When you tell your kids about the Hall of Fame, you're going to talk about Eli Manning. You're going to talk about the expectation of Eli Manning, how out of Ole Miss, he was an unbelievable college player. He's drafted number 1. He's going to the New York Giants. He's traded with Phillip Rivers, who's also a very, very good quarterback. That whole draft of Ben, Phillip, and Eli, all of this stuff helps your Hall of Fame case because you're painting a story. So you have the expectation of Eli Manning. And if Eli wasn't, I hear this a lot, if Manning is not Manning, if he doesn't have a last name of Manning, he's not getting into the Hall of Fame. And here's the thing, that might be accurate, but the pressure of being Eli Manning equaled a lot more criticism because you're Eli Manning. You're always in the shadow of Peyton, who's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. Eli's a really good quarterback. Peyton Manning is one of the Mount Rushmore of greatest quarterbacks of all time, right in his family. His dad is an incredible athlete, 3 times the athlete of any of his sons, except for Cooper. That's what Archie was for the Saints, and that's what Archie was in college in the SEC. So Eli Manning, just the way he was able to beat Tom Brady. He's the Goliath. He's the ultimate David in the NFL. Both times, the throw to Manningham, one of the greatest throws in Super Bowl history. And when you do that, and you're 2-0 in a Super Bowl, when you win 2 Super Bowls for a franchise in a 4-year span, you're a Hall of Famer any way you slice it. I guess you could look at Ken Stabler, I guess, for the Raiders. I would say the quarterback position is more important now, and Eli had to carry that team to Super Bowls. You can talk about the defense all you want. Eli Manning against the Cowboys, he had to put up points to win that game. Eli Manning against the Tampa Bay Bucks put up 24 points to win. That defense against the Packers had some breakdowns. It wasn't a perfect defense, but Eli Manning was able to conduct the offense in a way that was very efficient in those playoffs. He didn't turn the ball over one bit. If he did, they would have lost. It's not like the defense is out there it's not like the Giants defense in 2007 was the Ravens. Okay? It's not like they were It's not like they were the Ravens of 2000. And the Legion of Boom was a great defense. Colin Kaepernick at the time was very difficult to go against. He was like the Russell Wilson in 2013. So Kaepernick was great for those 2 years. Exceptional quarterback. Who knows if Cap will get back in the NFL. But the fact is, the Legion of Boom, they were a very good defense. They still had a very close kind of Giants-Packer-like NFC Championship game where Richard Sherman made the play, 20-17 game. Richard Sherman, the deflection, interception, really a classic NFL play. But the Seahawks defense is better than the Giants defense. And the Ravens defense was better. So the Giants defense, it was Herculean, it was incredible, but everything had to go right for the Giants to win that game. But for Eli Manning, the second season, that 2011, when he won that Super Bowl, Hall of Famer. And then Eli continued to play. If Eli then retired after, he'd probably still be a Hall of Famer. But then he continued to play, continued to pad his stats. And yeah, Eli, if he would have won 3 or would have gotten to another Super Bowl, then you talk about him, in the top 15 of quarterbacks ever. But Eli's probably still a top 20 quarterback to ever play the game, and that's why he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But in terms now of Daniel Jones and Joe Judge, I think that Joe Judge is going to be a coach. I think the Giants are going to go on a run. The Giants are going to go on a dynasty-like run where they're going to rip through the NFL and probably win 2 or 3, maybe 4 Super Bowls. And could Jones be like a Tom Brady? Like Jones wins, he game manages his way, but is he ever going to be elite like Tom Brady was with Randy Moss or Tom Brady later on in his career? I'm trying to think of who Jones can be like. Jones can maybe be a Big Ben Roethlisberger Hall of Famer. So could Jones be better than Eli Manning when it's all said and done? It's a crazy question to think about, but Jones is going to have a better coach in Joe Judge than Tom Coughlin. He's going to have a defense. He's going to have a running game. He's a better decision maker than Eli Manning. He's very fast. His arm strength is not as good as Eli Manning, though. But it's a very similar player. Who else is in the Hall of Fame that... Maybe it's Big Ben. I think that Jones can kind of be like Big Ben, Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger's better than Eli Manning. He has better statistics. He's always in the playoffs. So he's been better over the last 7 years. That's why he's in there. And he also had a great drive against the Cardinals. He's a more consistent quarterback. But when you win Super Bowls, you get in the Hall of Fame. So Jones, you compare Jones, Kurt Warner, nah, I'm not going to compare him to Kurt Warner. He's very unique, Jones, because he's a good quarterback. He's good, but he's not an amazing talent. He is just a taller quarterback who's a good athlete. He's just very smart, takes care of the ball. I don't think he's ever going to be the best player on the Super Bowl team. A little bit of like Terry Bradshaw, or Troy Aikman is a really good comparison for Daniel Jones. Troy Aikman, a guy who takes care of the football, has a superstar team around him, has Jimmy Johnson, and just is in the middle of the dynasty. He drives the bus. I think that it's going to be. He has Emmitt Smith. I think Troy Aikman is the perfect comparison for who Daniel Jones is. A guy who I think Troy Aikman had scrutiny out of UCLA and rose above the hatred. Troy Aikman, great teammate, very well liked in NFL circles. Daniel Jones is going to be that guy. And Joe Judge, I don't think he's leaving like Jimmy Johnson. I think the ownership is more poised. The Giants are poised, and the Giants, we're going to look back on Garoppolo, but specifically Daniel Jones. Or specifically Joe Judge. So if Jimmy Garoppolo wins a Super Bowl, which I'm saying he's going to do this year, you're going to look back at Garoppolo and you're going to think, okay, Garoppolo in New England, he would have won two championships more. Maybe we'll see what Stidham does, but you're going to look at Jimmy G as better. And then if the Patriots in-house had Joe Judge could maybe be like the Giants' Bill Belichick, okay? Unfortunately, Belichick is better than Parcells, so Belichick for the Patriots now is still the OG, the GOAT, and Parcells was a fantastic, phenomenal coach, but then Parcells ends up leaving, and instead of hiring Bill Belichick, the Giants make that mistake. Giants football would have been forever different. We would have grown up very, very spoiled, but we wouldn't have had the highs of the Super Bowl championships. But the Patriots are going to go back, and unless Steven Belichick's amazing, but they're going to end up with Josh McDaniels probably, and that's when they're going to go downhill. That's like the Shula, Mike Shula of Alabama. That's when Bear Bryant left, and it was Mike Shula. So the Patriots are going to go downhill after Belichick leaves. Belichick and Stidham, maybe they'll win a Super Bowl or two. The Giants then are going to have Joe Judge, and you're going to look back at the Patriots, and you're going to think if the Patriots, we're going to be having this discussion, we're going to say if the Patriots had Joe Judge as their head coach, they would have went on they would have literally destroyed the NFL. They would have just won. They would have taken however many rings, 6, and they would have maybe gotten to 11 with Joe Judge as the coach. Instead, the Giants are going to go from 4 championships. The Giants are going to go maybe to 8. And they're going to have more they're going to have maybe the same amount of championships overall as the Patriots and Giants. It's the John Mara, it's the Bill Belichick, it's the Parcells tree. Really, that is the tree that really, you look at Parcells to Belichick to Joe Judge. Those 3 were the alliance that pretty much took over the game of football. Belichick for the last 20 years, Parcells in the 90s. Everywhere Parcells went, he was really good as a coach. Andy Reid sprinkled in for sure with the Eagles, had his moments. Sean Payton, also a very good coach. The Harbaugh brothers definitely have their space. Then it's the Peyton Manning, the player movement, the quarterbacks of that time period. Tony Dungy, Peyton Manning. So, and Dungy did win that championship, so I don't know why I keep saying Jim Caldwell. Maybe Caldwell was in the 2010-2011 Super Bowl, but that's why I'm just so excited about Joe Judge. I really am. So that's the question, is I fear the Cowboys. The Niners are still very good. Is that defense, who knows where it's going to go, though, if Saleh leaves. I just trust Joe Judge and the Giants, and it's going to be Giants, it's going to be the Niners, it'll be the Cowboys a little bit. That's what's going to happen for the next 3 years. Kellen Moore, McCarthy. I've said for a while the Cowboys have a really good coaching staff. I think the world of Kellen Moore. And then in the AFC, is it going to be Joe Burrow? Probably not. It might be the whole AFC East is going to be fantastic. You're going to have Buffalo for a couple of years. You're going to have the Dolphins. You're going to have Tonga Vailoa, Brian Flores. Then you'll see McDaniels. I think Tonga Vailoa can challenge. Tonga Vailoa probably won a couple championships for the Dolphins. He'll come back. He'll definitely be mentioned like a Big Ben Roethlisberger in the next 20 years of the NFL. Tua Tonga Vailoa. Tua Tonga Vailoa. So that's how I kind of look at the league. Will Drew Lock have his chance to win a Super Bowl? He will. He'll win probably one. And be elite and be really, really good. Drew Lock and Josh Allen. So the AFC is really good. The NFL's in a beautiful space right now where it's going to be super fun to watch these guys play. And it's going to be super fun to be a fan of the NFL. And that is that. And college football, I couldn't even get really to college. I mean, could I go on 15 minutes, make this an hour and 30? I mean, I guess we're doing it. I guess we're going an hour and 30-minute podcast. We're going 90 minutes, without any ads, without any guests. If there was a guest here, this would maybe be a 2-hour podcast like Joe Rogan or Theo Vaughn, or you look at The King and the Sting. You look at the Bill Simmons podcast. You look at Part of My Take. All of those guys go an hour and 30, but they also all have interviews, so they're not talking the entire time, and they usually have guests. They have a producer. It's tough for a guy to go by himself. Joe Rogan is one of the very few that can do that. But how about hour and a half Fridays? We might even tag it hour and a half Friday. Could I maybe insert a guest during this podcast? That would be phenomenal. Could I do that? I probably could, actually. I probably could insert a guest. Could I insert a guest? I probably could insert a guest. Next week, I'm going to have one of my friends actually join me. I think it could be Garrett Jones. I think we could talk baseball. So that could be maybe the hour and a half podcast. Maybe it could be Tuesday and Friday. If you include the guest, maybe you have 2 hour and a half podcasts. You then have 3 hours worth of the podcast. That maybe could happen. You might have 3 hours worth of me talking. Then you talk about the NFL. Then you're going to have film reviews maybe happening, and we'll see how life is in a couple of months. We'll see where I'm at. We'll see where the NFL is at. We'll see where things are at in about 3 months. Could it be interesting? A lot of moving parts and things going on. So anyhow, let's try to keep saying anyhow. Let's talk about Nebraska football. And I definitely could go on about this. It could be hour 45. Let's talk about Nebraska for a half hour. Nebraska football. I love Nebraska football. And you know why I love Nebraska football? I love it because they care. I love teams that have tradition and care. Okay? I guess the Eagles, you hate them. The Dallas Cowboys, the Red Sox have tradition. I respect tradition. And people talk about Nebraska. Nebraska's never going to be back. The Nebraska Cornhuskers are never going to be a college football team that is ever going to be relevant again. That's the thing about Nebraska football is that they're never going to get the recruits, and they're never going to be able to compete with Clemson and Ohio State and Alabama football. The one thing that can really save Nebraska is paying athletes, because Lincoln, the Big Red Inn, they have a huge budget to spend on athletes. So what I envision for college football, and this should probably be the next podcast, but what I envision for college football is I envision a system where 16 to 17-year-olds are getting paid big stacks of money. And Nebraska, they have big-time car dealerships out in Lincoln. You could get a nice Dodge, go down to Dodge, get a Dodge Ram. You can pay off the running back. You can pay off offensive linemen to stay in the state of Nebraska or to come out to Nebraska because you're going to be getting fat stacks. So Nebraska, the boosters, everything, Memorial Stadium, it's absolutely jumping. The black shirts, everything about Nebraska. So Nebraska, with paying college athletes, is going to be the place to be. So the recruiting could be better. But anyway, Scott Frost is an elite level coach. I believe that. I was having this discussion with somebody this week. He said, Scott Frost, he wins 4 games this year. He's getting fired. I said to my friend, I said, no way that's happening, because Scott Frost is the chosen one of Nebraska football. I thoroughly believe it. Scott Frost is the prodigal son. He's the guy that comes back and he saves Nebraska football. That's what happens. Scott Frost is the one guy that is going to save Nebraska football. That's Scott Frost. He will save Nebraska football. Okay? And he'll do it with his up-tempo offense. He'll do it with being creative. He'll do it with Eric Shenandler as his defense. Maybe we'll see what happens to the defensive coordinator, but the offense has to pop first in Nebraska. You have Adrian Martinez. The offense that Scott Frost runs is elite. Mackenzie Milton, Marcus Mariota, it was very good its first year. The Huskers just blew games last year, and they didn't have any wide receiver talent. So Adrian Martinez also, he had too much hype going into his sophomore year. It was a classic sophomore slump. Martinez is going to be running the ball more. He's going to be playing with more of a sense of urgency. You're not going to see McCaffrey at the quarterback position for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's going to be Adrian Martinez. And then Scott Frost is also a great recruiter. He's putting Nebraska in the top 20. Nebraska's defense is going to be very good. This doesn't just get fixed overnight. They're still dealing with Mike Riley players. You're still dealing with the guys that went to Oklahoma State. You're still dealing with a lot of transfers. And Scott Frost is still figuring out the ways of the Big Ten West. You look at P.J. Fleck, first couple of years, 5 wins and 7 wins. 7 wins if you include the bowl game, so really 5 and 6 win seasons. And then he goes up to 10 wins. Dabo Swinney at Clemson, first couple of years, not that good. The point is that these are historic places, and Nebraska is history. And Nebraska, with Scott Frost, they went through Pelini, who was all right, and then they went through Bo Callahan, and they also, Callahan. I think it was Bo Callahan. And then they went with who else? And then they went through the Mike Riley period. That was awful. So, and just to get to Scott Frost, who is ready. So Scott Frost is the guy. He is the hometown hero. He is a little messiah for Nebraska. You talk about Tom Osborne, and he is the GOAT. And then you talk about Tom Osborne Jr., that could be Scott Frost, the quarterback of Nebraska, who won a championship there. Scott Frost loved in Lincoln. You also have Fred Hoiberg there coaching basketball. So Nebraska is on the rise. It's one of the coolest athletic teams if you're going to work for them. So Scott Frost is a baller. Nebraska's going to be fine. This year they're probably going to win about 7 or 8 games with COVID, lack of wide receivers. And then is Shenandler, is he the guy long-term for this defense? We don't know. But you also have Barrett Ruud, who was an exceptional linebacker in Nebraska. The staff is awesome. They work really hard. And they're figuring out how to win. This is a long 10 to 20-year plan. This is Scott Frost. This is going to be his university. He loves Nebraska more than anything. He is from rural Nebraska. He is not leaving Nebraska. Nebraska, if you look about in 5 years, who's going to be in better shape, Alabama or Nebraska? I'm taking Nebraska. Next 15 years, because after Saban retires, Saban's already scheduling some of the biggest teams in college football for the year 2022 or 2028. So Nebraska is going to be in a space where they're going to be dominant. Nebraska and Minnesota are going to be like LSU and Alabama. That's what's going to happen. P.J. Fleck and Scott Frost are going to win national championships. Could the University of Tennessee, I think Arkansas could come back under Sam Pittman. You look at Walmart, all the money that Walmart has, and that is going to be giving the players. So Nebraska, the key for them is they need some good cornerbacks. You already have some defensive linemen. You have Ndamukong Suh. You had the Bo Pelini days. It's going to be cold in Nebraska, so that slows you down, and that's going to be big for winning these championships. You got to win the West first, and it's going to be you and Minnesota, and then you're going to go to Ohio State. The expansion of the playoff helps Nebraska out a ton because you have Ohio State, you have Minnesota, Jim Jim Harbaugh and Michigan are going to have good years. Penn State with James Franklin. So you are going to have an expanded playoff. So with the combination of expanded playoffs, the combination of Nebraska being able to pay huge sums of money to kids, it's going to change recruiting. Clemson isn't going to dominate recruiting. There's more money in Nebraska and in the University of Tennessee and in the University of Arkansas. There's more fan support and money in those places than Clemson. Okay, so there's going to be more booster money and more bags being dropped in those places. And the good players are going to go where the money goes. That's why when you start paying these college athletes, it's going to open up Pandora's box. It's going to also open up possibilities of parity, and you're going to see everything change in college football. You're seeing it right now with Florida. You have Marco Rubio. You also have the guy, Ron DeSantis. They're trying to come up with legislation to start paying collegiate athletes immediately. I know Rubio is behind it. There's probably some Democratic senators and Democratic congressmen as well. It's a thing in Florida. It's a bipartisan thing that the people in Florida, that government wants to see the Florida Gators and the Florida State Seminoles and the Miami Hurricanes. They want to have elite level talent stay in the state of Florida. And in 2021, they're putting the pressure to start allowing guys to make money off of likeness. And listen, if I was a car dealership and I had so much money, I would say that I'm the owner of a car dealership that's very successful. I'm making $5 million. If I didn't have a family and kids, I'd probably take $1 million of that. I'd spend it on players. So then your offensive lineman, right? I'd pay a 5-star offensive lineman. I'd study tape with the coaching staff. I don't know if that's even legal or not, or if that's, a violation. Study tape and say, this lineman's going to be in the NFL in 3 years. Let's pay this guy right off the bat. Let's give him $40,000 to come. So then if you have $1 million budget, you don't want to spend $700,000 unless the quarterback is like Spencer Rattler, unless the quarterback is going to be like a Tua Tagovailoa. That's a lot of money to spend your $1 million on. But if you could spend money, recruiting these 18-year-olds to college football, that's wonderful. That's capitalism. That's making money off of your likeness and your skill. I mean, at 18 years old, you can enter the Army. At 18 years old, you're an adult. And so these guys should be getting paid money because they're elite, okay? You look at Marcus Lattimore. Try to tell Marcus Lattimore out of South Carolina. Try to tell that guy that when he was a superstar at South Carolina and when he was one of the best high school players ever, you try to tell that guy they should have been worth any money. That's BS. That's BS. These players, you look at Joe Burrow, they're wearing Joe Burrow jerseys all the time in LSU. There's no reason why these players shouldn't be able to just profit off of their own likeness. Paying the players is actually a very difficult conversation, but paying them off of their likeness and advertising, these guys are already getting paid under the table by boosters, so you would take that war that you have with boosters and all the shady stuff going on, and it's all transparent in a better way. It's all transparent. It's almost like if you legalize weed, you'll have less violence over weed disputes with drug dealers. That's kind of what I believe with just marijuana, right? That's not even that political of an issue. I think that maybe there's some real anti-marijuana people on here on social media, but mostly younger people are watching YouTube, and marijuana, if it helps out, it's helped out. Studies have shown that weed has helped out people. So there you go. Now I'm going off of sports a little bit into weed talk. But these players making money, it's going to be a huge deal for the results on the field. Not only in these lives are their lives going to get better, will their parents now have some money if they're coming from poor areas, but also the recruiting now is going to be even more interesting because it's going to challenge Dabo. It's going to say, hey, you might have to take less money to play at Clemson, but you're going to win games at Clemson, okay? Is it Clemson or Clemson? Clemson, maybe, with an I, I'll say. So you win games at Clemson, win games there, you get to the league. So even though you're not making as much as Nebraska's going to pay you, you're still going to get to the NFL. It's going to challenge Clemson. Okay, if I was a Clemson fan like Pigskin Pete is, I'd be scared to death about this because you aren't gonna have your dynasties anymore. You're gonna have to compete with Florida State for recruits. You're gonna have to compete in the ACC with North Carolina and all the boosters actually there with Mac Brown and all the football facilities that are getting put up there. I'm not going to say Duke and Georgia Tech because they don't have the greatest football fans. Georgia Tech is University of Georgia. That's a Georgia state. It's a Bulldog state, not a Yellow Jacket state. And then you also have the Duke Blue Devils. That's a basketball school. So Cutcliffe, you also have the academic rigors, the private University of Duke. So the public schools that have these big money around the towns, they're going to be making some stacks. You look at Oklahoma State, it's going to be really fun. That's going to be fun. The University of Texas, there's going to be big-time money, big-time boosters coming in. It's going to be unbelievable for college football. We'll talk about this more. Recruiting, is it somewhat immoral to analyze a 17-year-old in terms of how much money is he going to be making? Is that weird? It could be weird, but it's also more fun. It's more fun for the player getting paid, and also it prepares the player for scrutiny when they get to the NFL. Now, maybe the player takes no money, because if the player then takes money, yes, you're going to look at him differently. You're going to criticize him more. It's going to be funny when the radio host at the local radio host in the town, who's a 45-year-old male, is making less money than an 18-year-old college kid quarterback. That's going to be a different dynamic. But then if the college kid then wants to get defensive, the radio host can actually start being more critical of players because they are getting paid. And then the dialogue of college sports is better, because instead of shying away from insulting the player, if the player makes money, the radio host will then have the ability to be more interesting and kind of complain and vent about the players, because the player is actually making money. They're not just this poor college kid anymore. So all of that just really factors in. And look, we're at an hour and a half. I said it was 9 o'clock. It ended up being 10:30. It's now after midnight on a Friday. I still have some stuff to do, but I'm going to upload this podcast. Going to download it as an MP3. Going to put it on my Twitter page. I'll throw out a couple of tweets tonight. Got a couple of followers there that might listen to this podcast. Put it on Facebook. It's an hour and a half rant on the NFL, on Major League Baseball, on the bubble, all of that kind of stuff we discussed tonight on this hour and a half segment show. Hour and a half and now 5 seconds worth of a show. So let's see how much you guys listen to it. Are you guys going to love it? Are you guys going to maybe listen 2 minutes? Are you not even going to click the video? All three are possibilities, and all three are your decision, and that is fine by me. Okay, that's it. I'm going to leave now. Take care. Thank you, guys. See ya.